Invisible Geographies, the Poetics of Digital Infrastructure. Within this presentation, I will argue that invisibility of infrastructure, rather than being a byproduct of the nature of digital technology, is in fact a fundamental driver in the development of ubiquitous and mobile computing. Invisibility is firmly rooted in the philosophy underpinning the development of ubiquitous and mobile computing, and this carries ethical and political consequences that need to be addressed within both HCI and spatial research. I will suggest that fine art performance practices that explore the aesthetic and poetic qualities of urban space can play a valuable role in thinking about this problematic. Most people are socialised to know very little about the infrastructure that surrounds them in everyday life, whether these are electrical systems, sewer pipes, or broadcast networks. Not only are people socialised to be unaware of such systems, infrastructures are often designed intentionally to be invisible or transparent, integrated within the built environment, whether submerged underground, covered by ceilings and walls, or camouflaged as nature. Many infrastructural studies have suggested that infrastructures remain invisible, only revealing themselves when they are disrupted or when they break down. Larkin has challenged the characterisation of infrastructure as invisible. He suggests that there is a range of infrastructural visibilities, from the unseen to the grand spectacle and everywhere in between. For example, we can compare the invisibility of the London sewer system with the spectacle of Tower Bridge. The invisibility or visibility of infrastructure is often a political choice. It is therefore important to distinguish the specific conditions of invisibility of any given infrastructure. My research focuses on the invisibility of East London's digital infrastructure. More precisely, East London's ubiquitous and mobile computer infrastructure. It does not approach digital infrastructure from a technical perspective. Rather, it is interested in the everyday ambience created by infrastructures and intervenes in the city to expose overlooked or previously inaccessible processes, bringing them into discourse. It focuses on the ontic, the aesthetic and the poetic qualities and the role they play within the digitally expanded city. The first performance study was Invisible Geographies. Invisible Geographies made use of specially designed radio receivers to make the transmissions of communications infrastructure such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth and mobile phones audible. The use of radio receivers within the event made the wireless infrastructures and the machine-to-machine communications audible, allowing the participants to become aware of their presence as they walked the environment. The study took place on April the 12th, 2019. Participants were given receivers to explore Finsbury Park and the surrounding area. An example observation from Study 1. 3 drift participants had stopped near a recently planted tree in Finsbury Park. 2 of the participants were holding their antennas and discussing with the third an interesting discovery. A repetitive sequence of sounds was being received at this location. Its alien sound had a coherent structure of rising and falling frequencies. The participants with the antennas stood frozen to the spot, raising and lowering their antennas and changing their directions. One suggested that the transmission was stronger at head height and became weaker above this level or closer to the ground. A clearer signal could be received by holding the antennas in a particular direction. The participants could not locate the sound of the transmission, but what was clear was that they had tapped into a stream of data. The data was surprisingly spatial in that the participants experimented in tracing its boundaries. The participants remained in this location for nearly 10 minutes, testing out parameters and walking the data transmission. Whilst the experience could not be understood by the participants in technical terms, the experience had given them an embodied understanding of the infrastructure of ubiquitous and mobile computing. The second performance event, Searching for the Cloud, tracked down the sites of East London's data centres, linking them through a walk following the route of underground fibre optic cables. Around 30 walkers met at 2 o'clock on Sunday the 27th of October 2019 at Chris Street Market in Poplar, East London. The walk used a map of London's underground fibre optic network to chart a route linking the core data centres in the UK's internet. These included Global Switch North, which is the final termination point of Atlantic Crossing 1, the main subsea cable linking the UK directly to the United States. The walk revealed the physicality of the infrastructure that supports East London's cloud computing. One of the strongest responses to the Searching for the Cloud event occurred when entering the site of Telehouse and Global Switch campuses. The streets are straight, wide and open. They are lined on both sides by high-tech architecture of streamlined aluminium and glass. The response was felt, a pre-rational sense that passed between the group. It was unspoken, yet instinctively the group altered their behaviour. They became quieter and walked closer together on the street. The streets were empty and eerily quiet given their location adjacent to the A13. The group responded by stopping talking and walking faster. The quietness revealed a perceptible hum of electricity that gave the environment a paranoid soundtrack. All of these features work together to guide our attention away from the large data centres and to our own presence within this landscape. The architecture makes you self-conscious, more aware of your own body and its presence within the environment. When we left the area, a number of participants commented that it felt like we were being watched. Analysing the experience of these two events, 3 key themes emerged. They were, number 1, infrastructural invisibility, number 2, the affect of infrastructure, and number 3, the infrastructure of fantasy, desire and imagination. Number 1, infrastructural invisibility. The invisibility of East London's digital infrastructure is rooted both in the theoretical origins of ubiquitous and mobile computing and by post-9/11 security concerns that formed the political climate within which they were developed. Security concerns are particularly central to the invisibility of the sites that form the London Internet Exchange. However, my research argues that an HCI disciplinary reading of Heidegger's phenomenology, and in particular his concept of ready to hand and present at hand, is at the core of a wider digital infrastructural invisibility and the creation of black box entities such as the cloud. In Heidegger's terminology, equipment is present at hand when the user is conscious of it, when the user's attention is focused on the equipment in itself. When equipment is used to carry out a task, it has a tendency to disappear from consciousness. It is, in Heidegger's terms, ready to hand. The move from present at hand to ready to hand is the move from visibility to invisibility. As ubiquitous and mobile computing increase, the invisibility of these technologies raises important ethical and political questions. For example, if the aim of ubiquitous computing devices are to weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life, how does a society consent to such a vast harvesting of data from everyday life if the technology remains invisible? Number 2, the effect of infrastructure. The two very different events found that the materiality of digital infrastructure plays an important role in producing the ambience of everyday life. The effective properties of digital infrastructure were particularly pronounced in the physical sites that form the London Internet Exchange, especially the Telecity and Global Switch campuses. What was apparent from the Searching for the Cloud event was that East India Dock Road marks an effective border between two starkly contrasting environments. These large data centres produce an eerie, securitized atmosphere that is experienced primarily as felt rather than rationalized. These structures hide their presence. However, in doing so, they create affective zones. It is through the experience of walking East London's digital infrastructure that an embodied understanding of the materiality and ambience created by digital infrastructures starts to be understood. My research argues that a performance art practice can reveal the effective qualities of East London's digital infrastructure. Number 3. The infrastructure of fantasy, desire and imagination. By participating in the Invisible Geographies event, the material properties of data transmissions were revealed by making them audible. This enabled new embodied understandings to be produced that combined the specific spatial and sonic properties of the data transmissions with the properties of the site. The Invisible Geographies event exposed that items of digital infrastructure have their own aesthetic qualities, unrelated to their technical functions. For example, the aesthetic qualities produced by the pulsing transmissions of Wi-Fi has a different aesthetic quality to the high-pitched signal of 4G mobile communications. These aesthetic qualities have an impact on how participants responded to certain technologies, and because the transmissions are always experienced in particular locations, the combination between sight and signal alter how the participants felt and understood the spaces of the event. Aesthetics are experienced in the real time of an event. Poetics, on the other hand, are the reflective spatial imaginaries which are formed in response to an aesthetic experience. Being affected by digital infrastructure is the moment of potential which inspires subjective and intersubjective spatial imagination to emerge. Put more simply, events in which people experience the materiality of digital infrastructure in new and unexpected ways inspire new spatial imaginaries. In conclusion, invisibility, rather than being a natural quality of digital infrastructure, is a fundamental driver in the philosophy, design and development of ubiquitous and mobile computing. Invisibility enables the use of digital technology, but also has the potential to mask surveillance and misuses of personal data. This carries ethical and political consequences as ubiquitous computing becomes a reality and more environments and objects are embedded with computational capacities. The experience of the two performance studies produced a multiplicity of poetics of digital infrastructure, inspiring new spatial imaginaries. The participants actively formed alternative realities around sites and their digital infrastructures. I argue that this is a necessary process in the development of a politics and ethics capable of responding to the challenges posed by the introduction of ubiquitous and mobile computing into urban space.